bro.
Hey,
J-Bo.
this is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Rock, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
Cover! We got us a new world champion!
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby! It's the real deal, baby!
Knockouts and 3 Counts starts now.
Ooh, what up? No, it is another Tuesday. This is Knockouts and 3 Counts, man. And it ain't Smoking Joe, but we're going to be talking some Joe Frazier today. But we got the debut of a legend of the combat sports game. We got Burt Watson joining us, my man. I appreciate your time.
Oh man, I appreciate you guys, man. That's an awesome intro into your program, man, with those knockouts. Yeah, I like that.
Hey, man, try to make it look professional for y'all.
No, that was pretty dope. That was pretty dope.
Shout out to Game Bread. Shout out to good old JR and all the pro wrestling side of things too, for all of our wrestling fans that are tuning in. It says y'all are all getting in here to the stream. If you guys get in here, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that share button. But Burt, man, like I said, I've really been looking forward to this one. We got the link up during Clarissa Shields fight week, which was dope to get to do that and get to chop it up with you. First of all, we might as well talk about that. How was all that, man? I know you were doing MMA for a long time. How do you feel being back out in boxing? How do you feel being back here in Michigan?
Well, it was definitely. I've always enjoyed. I've only been to Michigan 3 times, but each time it's been memorable. It was definitely awesome to see that, and I'm sure that she was excited being back home in a home crowd. I followed her career a little, but more so when she transitioned from boxing to MMA and then went back to boxing. So that was actually the first time that I really had to work with her one-on-one. And the crowd is what always gets me. And that enthusiasm, man, and that Detroit crowd is off the chain. But you guys are sports fans, so that goes without saying. The most
picked a good time, bro. It was right after the Lions finally did something too. I mean, Detroit sports is hot right now between the Pistons, the Lions.
Fight, every time the round would end, he'd play whoop that trick. The crowd would go.
Oh shit! Yeah, you ain't kidding.
He knew what he was doing out there. He knew what he was doing, man.
Wow! That's awesome. And a lot of people don't know, but that the DJ makes the night unbelievable, and you don't pay attention to it unless it's not there. Yep. Okay, or he's doing a bad job. But when you got an awesome DJ that knows to hit his marks and to hit his cues, it's working in boxing and MMA. I get to realize that because I can tell you something, bro. I have yet to work with a fighter that didn't move until he was on his mark or he was on his cue or that music hit his cue. I don't care who it was. He was not moving. And they all got little segments of the song that they move on, and they don't move until it hits that mark. And I learned that the hard way. But
who'd you try to make move and who'd you piss off?
Oh man, just about initially everybody, because what I was cued to do was I started working with television, and when you get to the high level like an HBO or Showtime where they no longer, which I don't know why they got out of combat sports, but when you get to that level, that television, when they said we want that first fighter to walk at 8:07, they mean 8:07. Mm-hmm. If that fighter's music don't come on until 8:09, he ain't walking. Yeah. Okay. And I learned that the hard way. I grabbed Uriah Faber one time to pull him on. He didn't like that.
You didn't wait for California Love to hit, huh?
No. You know, and I found out, man. I'm like, no, I think I better not do that. But I learned that before Uriah Faber. But I'm just saying that he was the last one that I remember that I forgot about that. And I but now, you know what? I told them guys, I said, you know what? Your night, your fight, you got to go get it right. You know, you move when you ready to move, baby. Don't let anybody else tell you what to do. It ain't but two, him and you.
Bro, you had all the energy when we were walking Clarissa out to the ring. We were walking right behind you, bro. You were just as hype as everybody.
I thought we was going out there to fight ourselves, man. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah, but you know, I feel that, man.
Everything.
I feel it. You know, I feel every bit of that because I know what it is in that dressing room, and I know what it is, that mindset, and how those men and women, guys and girls, how they get, you know, that shit switches off and on, man. And you got to be in tune with that. So, you know, if I didn't have that energy level to give to them, it would show, and they would feel it because they get enough downers, you know, from the commission and the television people wanting them to do this and wanting them to do that, and you know, when you get to that point, they forget the mentality of the fighter. And that's the lane I always stay in. The mentality of that fighter. And they're getting them to a level of walking out of that dressing room on cue and on time. And I let them know there's one voice back there, baby. And I let it go good and loud. Trust me.
Dude.
That's
You've got the iconic
sure,
call with that too. That we rolling will long outlive you, bro.
You know, I'm gonna wave a little because that it got to a point where you know, when you're working fights at night, the dressing rooms sometimes are close together and sometimes they're spread out, far apart. And you got to hit each and every door, each and every dressing room, each and every fighter, because they got to move when you want them to move. But you got to coordinate that. And, man, I used to run up and down the halls and run in and out of the dressing rooms. And, you know, by the end of the night, my feet were this big, man. And I couldn't stand up for 2 days at the end of the night, especially if I had anywhere from 9 to 15 fights on a card. Shit. And I'd run in the dressing room. I'd run in, time to go. And I did a show back in the day when they first opened up at the MGM Grand. You Google that, you'll see how long ago that was. But when they first opened up, I did the show. And I was going back in and out of the dressing room. And I ran to the top of the hall. And I called somebody. And he heard me all the way down the other end of the hall. And I said, shit, I'm not running in and out of that dressing room no more. No. I didn't know my voice carried like that. So I got out, man, and I ran to the top of the hall, and I turned around. All right, baby, time to roll. Time to roll. Time to go to work. We rolling. And then went all the way. And you know what? The next thing I knew, the one thing that I didn't count on was everybody came out of the dressing room, but I only wanted 2 of them. You know, so we had to stop who we didn't want to walk. But man, from that point on, that was it. I did not walk up and down the hall anymore. I went to the top of the hall and stood just where they could hear me. I would go in the room and I'd say, you on deck, you on deck, you on deck, you next, you on deck. You on deck. So when they heard me say, we rolling, they knew that was theirs. And they came flying out of there. So that's kind of how that came about. And it's stuck, man. I'm just surprised that over the years my voice has changed, but I haven't lost it, you know, from all that yelling and screaming. But I wouldn't have it any other way, baby.
I'm surprised you ain't losing on a nightly basis when you're the way you're yelling at somebody. The motivational talks, man. It's just hearing some of the cameras, behind the scenes and stuff. Some of the things that they're able to capture, the work that you've done and stuff. Just to think about all the fights that you've kind of orchestrated, the walks and stuff to the cage and stuff like that, and all the fighters that you've motivated. It's got to be such a thing to look back on at this point in your career, and to still be doing it, like Kyle was just saying, with the Clarissa Shields and stuff of the world in their hometown event. It's got to be something cool to kind of be at this point in your career where you can be a little more picky and choosy about where you want to apply that energy to.
Yeah, it gets to that point with time, and history has a way of making you a part of it without you asking for it, and it catches up, But I sit back now that we are at a stage where everybody has a platform, and I'm so happy that it has happened that way, that all fighters get a platform now, and they all get to speak, and they all get television time, and I can sit and look back on how far back, it goes with me and the fighters, and from boxing, and I transitioned from boxing to MMA in 1999. Did my very first MMA pre-fight kind of thing to see if I was going to get into it. And in 2000, I just jumped over and I started doing boxing and MMA. And I was doing both boxing and MMA until 2007 or 2008. And the last really major boxing I did was the Klitschko brothers, because I did their fights. I did their fights as well. And everybody from 1981 to today, the only person that I have not worked with on an event is Lennox Lewis. When I say only, you get a fight, you get 10 to 15 fights, and when you do, you get everybody on the fight. So I mean, from Oscar De La Hoya to Tyson, Roy Jones, Sugar Ray Leonard, Duran, and then to get into MMA in the early part of MMA with Gracie and the Shamrock and Randy. When my first UFC was 230, I think. Well, 230, UFC 30. Damn, I jumped 200.
I was like 230 was on.
I was like, man, we skipped a bunch.
yeah, UFC 30, Atlantic City. And it was that was my first time working with Kevin Randleman and Coleman. And I mean, those guys were characters. God bless. And that was also my introduction into MMA. I was used to boxing, and that was all stand up, guys jabbing and throwing jabs and getting slick and technical skills. I wasn't used to a guy putting his hands on another guy and taking him down. That was strange to me. I mean, I knew about wrestling, but I didn't know that there was a sport that was televised, that was actually was controlled by the athletic commission. And man, when I got into MMA, I was floored. I had no idea, but honestly, they learned so much quicker. When I started in MMA, and I know guys are gonna get mad I say this, but they was fighting like this. They was throwing punches like that, and then they did that, then they grabbed and they threw it. And this went to this real quick, man. They went to stand-up skills, and they started learning how to jab and following boxing, and they was bobbing and weaving. And I'm like, whoa. They went from this to that real quick. and then the whole thing changed, and then it went to a stand-up game, which was the game plan to a ground game, and to see that whole thing develop, man, was definitely something special and something now that, I look back on because it's behind me and it has developed. And I mean, I'm amazed at the skills level, and you guys probably know as much as I do how athletes have progressed in their technical skill levels in all sports. You got guys 7'5" now, double dribbling through their legs and around their heads.
3-pointers.
I'm telling you, from the what's his name shot one from the bench the other night. The Jokic, is it? Whoever it was.
Jokic.
Shit. 100. I mean, the full length. And it was net. Yep. So the skill levels of all the athletes, and that's something that I have seen, and I've been more impressed with that than I have been the people that I've worked with, because I've seen their development and how each generation brings a little more technical skill level and brings a little more flash in the pan, but still the basics of it is still hardcore. They put a little fluff on it, but it's still hardcore, and it's fun to sit back now and to see. It's moving a little fast for me because there's a lot of guys that are coming along now and coming up that I don't know. But no, it's definitely been a journey, man, and one that I cherish and respect, and I'm proud that I've had an opportunity to be on that journey.
Before we get to your beginnings and we talk a little bit about I Am Joe Frazier, man, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, because like I said, my first seeing you was when I started coming up in MMA. Like the first UFC I ever went to was UFC 88 when Chuck and Rashad fought. And then I went to when Brock and Randy fought at UFC 91 at the MGM Grand. And those were like the first couple I got to see in person, not as far as MMA fights, but one of my teammates at the time, and I still see him all the time at the fights. Shout out to James Lee. He was supposed to fight Tim Bosch that night.
Wow.
And I was training together with him at that gym at that time, man. And that was my 16th birthday present. I'll never forget it. It was, I remember seeing Herschel Walker walk in there. We went to Atlanta. My dad had no clue where the fuck we were going, walked all over Bankhead. I had to ask a homeless guy, hey, bro, how do I get to this hotel? It was so hot in Atlanta that day that I had the shirt that we bought for the fight. I sweated through that shit so bad they had to buy me another shirt before we went to the fucking arena.
You talk about shirts. Tim Boach was the first guy I saw. He had on a flannel shirt and a cap. And I had no idea, and I mean a little trucker's hat or something he had on. Right. I had no idea this guy was a fighter. Not even a clue. He had no look like he was a fighter. Sleeve rolled up and shit. But man, when he
a truck.
Woof, yeah, he was definitely. I was like, wow. I was stunned, I just thought I didn't know who he was, but he was just sitting there like this, shirt on, flannel shirt, little hat cocked on. Man, he brings back.
So I got to ask you, man. So with that said, before we jump over to the boxing side, is there any favorite memories of your time, with UFC or MMA, that jump out in particular, whether that be just walking somebody to the ring or something that stands out as a holy shit, I can't believe this happened?
Well, there's a few times that few things that I can look back on and that happened, but then there are times that things happen that you won't ever forget. And I think one of them was when once Anderson Silva had his first title shot, and he had his kids there. Now I didn't know Anderson had kids. I knew he had a private life, but didn't know he had kids. And he had his two sons, and I didn't allow kids and family members in the dressing room, because if you did, I mean, by the time you let everybody in, that dressing room would have been a mess.
Right.
But somehow them kids got back there, and the security came, and the security was putting the kids out, and they were wrangling and they was chasing them. And Anderson Silva came and found me, and he said to me, "I'm going to give you my two kids, and I'm going to forget that they're here because I'm going to give them to you." Man, you talk about somebody turning into a little peanut butter mush. Like, whoa.
A lot of pressure right there, man.
He gave me his two sons, and I walked them to the cage, and I put them in my two seats, right behind his dad's corner. I will never forget that as long as I live. You know, a couple of times I've had to straighten Mr. John Jones out a couple of times. Him and Mr. McGregor. I had to straighten Mr. McGregor out once, you know, but I also learned their personalities. And you know, the same Conor McGregor that you see is the same Conor McGregor that I saw as a rookie. Same John Jones that you see was the same. And I'm not picking those names out. I'm just naming names like that. You know, the only one that I could say that was, I never really saw it coming, was George St. Pierre.
Really?
I didn't see that coming, because George was so low key and so quiet and not at all. There was no fire around George at all. Well, first of all, it was French that he spoke.
Yep.
You know, and when he spoke, you had to really listen to him because of the accent that he had. So I didn't see none of that coming until that bell rang and he started going. Shoo! Man, I didn't see that coming at all. You know, that was kind of nice to be a part of. And then as MMA started going a little further, someone said, and I won't say his name, but someone said women will never, ever, ever be in that sport.
Yeah.
Along came Ronda Rousey. Jeez, man! But I was told that would never happen. This would never, ever. They would never be in that sport. And along came Ronda, Kat Zingano, Cyborg, all the rest of them, and just ate it up, man. Just ate it up.
Yeah, turned it into a whole thing for themselves. I mean, you literally got women's champs that are so well respected now. You know, it's wild.
Not only that, but they could fight. It was like that in boxing. You know, they said the same thing in boxing, and then Christy Martin came along. You know, and then you went to the era of Shields, and then you went to Layla Ali. And, you know, women did themselves justice in combat sports, babe. I'm telling you.
Hell yeah.
There was no.
You love to see it too. That Serrano fight is
living proof of it, man. Like, that was like, I said it on the show after that whole Tyson fight happened. I was like, man, to me, that was the best thing that came out of that whole shit.
That fight
was the fact that them two got to fight on that big of a stage and had such a badass fight like that. That was the best thing to come out of that.
Man, who you telling? Who you telling? They were, and you know, I mean, some people say, and I heard a lot of people say, "Oh, that fight saved the night." But in my opinion, that fight was exactly what it was going to be. You know, I wasn't surprised to see what I saw from those ladies. You know, but it's just that the other one was. So I will say, it was what it was. It really brought that out, but that wasn't unexpected, man. You know, that's exactly what I expected from those
especially
two.
after our last fight.
That's what I was just gonna say. If for those in the know, it was like you say, it was exactly what you would expect because of being the rematch. You kind of knew what was on the plate for both women. It was a huge fight.
Yes.
You knew what was. But for people, for instance, like my mom, who doesn't tune into fights but cared to ask me about she wants to see Tyson put this young kid out,
Right.
So she's tuning in. Now all of a sudden, a fight like that gets eyeballs from true casual fans that have almost zero interest in fighting other than, their classics like a Tyson. And now their walk away is, look at how well this women's card, like you say, essentially bolstered the night and made it a watchable product at the end of the day.
And would want to know the next time they saw a fight, what women are fighting. Okay.
Yeah.
And if not, why are there no women? But women have definitely stood their ground in combat sports and have definitely made a mark legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we said, it says it right in the title. We got to talk about I Am Joe Frazier. But before we get to that, we got to talk about how did you get into fighting in the first place? Because I'm not going to lie. When you and I talked on the phone the other day and you were telling me to make sure you checked it out, again, I guess maybe that, and it's funny for me to say that because I've always considered myself the guy who loves watching all the documentaries and knowing all the shit. When I started reading through that and listening to you guys talk about the different instances that you had with Joe and stuff like that, how'd you find your way into fighting in the first place?
Honestly, I always count my blessings through all things Christ. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. I had a chance meeting with Joe Frazier. Walking down the streets of New York, and there was a car accident. I'll make this as short as I possibly can. There was a car accident, and the traffic stopped in New York, and the cars were parked, and out of this car pops Joe Frazier. And I'm looking at him, and, you kind of double take because I'm talking about 1980? Or so when he was still at the peak of being smoking Joe Frazier. And I'm like, whoa. And I talked to him. He spoke to me very cordially, like he'd known me all his life. And he said to me, you know what? I got a gym in Philly. Whenever you're in Philly again, stop by the gym. So I stopped by the gym, and when I went to Philly, I stopped by the gym and saw him. 3 months later, my niece got married, and one of my mother's friends gave my niece a present of a limousine service to take her from my mother's house to the church. I'm in the house. True story. The limousine pulls up, and my nephew comes into the house, and he says, Uncle Burt, the car's outside, and he says he can't park. There's no place to park, so he has to double park. So I said, you go tell that driver he needs to park that car someplace until we come out, and then he comes back around. Well, my nephew wasn't going to do that because he was a little scared to do it. So I went outside to tell the driver to do that. And I went outside, and the windows were rolled up. It was a white stretch. The windows were rolled up, and I knocked on the window, and it was tinted. Guy rolled the window down, and it was Joe Frazier. And I'm just, you know what? I looked and I did a double take. I'm like, nah, no way. And he kind of remembered that he saw me in New York. And I asked him, what the heck? Well, Joe had a limousine service attached to his gym. And he had a habit of coming in. Back then, we didn't have computers. Everything was done on a clipboard. You wrote everything down. So the clipboard was on the side of the ring in the gym. He picked it up, and there was no name beside the job, which was my niece's. So since the driver wasn't there, he decided that he was going to get in the car and take the drive. He got in the car and he drove. I almost passed out when I saw him. Well, the rest of my niece's wedding, I forgot my niece was getting married because I was talking to Joe Frazier. I just put her in the back of the car and I sat up front with him. So we kind of stayed in touch, and we started kind of hanging out a little bit. He said, "Listen, man, I'm gonna be in Philly, such and such, and let's go have a drink." So Joe Frazier asked me to go out. I went with him.
Having a drink.
Say no.
It was like, are you kidding me? So I did that. That happened once, happened twice, happened the third time. When it got to about number 10 or 11, I said to him, you know what, bro? You got to either hire me or leave me the hell alone. And that's a true story. I said, I can't do this. Because I was not used to hanging out past 10 and 11 o'clock at night and going out. And when I went out with him, we were mob. I wasn't used to that. And everybody, you'd go into a bar and people sitting there with a wig all twisted around and laid down. He comes in and they see it's him, and he was not one that liked to go to fancy places. We had a Playboys Club in Philadelphia and fancy. He wanted to go to the hood bars. Yeah. That was his thing. He went
That's
there.
where the good times are at.
Yeah.
When we walked in there, when we walked into those people had liquor on the ceiling. They ran the whole bar. So you know what he did? He took me to the gym and he gave me a chair. And I never left his office since. And I started kind of putting his stuff together. And the next thing, every time somebody wanted something, he'd tell me to take the call. I kept taking the call and coordinating things for him and never left him. And that's how I got into boxing. And it was, and he had Marvis, he had Joe, my time with Joe Frazier was with 6 other Fraziers fighting at the same time, between Marvis and Hector and Rodney and Mark and Frank, and then his daughter, Jackie Frazier. And she
fought too? I didn't know that. That's dope.
Let me tell you a dope. I met Joe and started, we hang out and we started hanging. It all came to a point of meeting Muhammad Ali. And we did a video called Champions Forever. And that was the video between the 5 guys, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, and Larry Holmes. Their fights. And it was called Champions Forever. Well, during that time, Layla started fighting and Jackie started fighting. And they actually ended up fighting each other. And I did that fight. And that fight was in 2008 at the Turning Stone Casino up in New York. And we had a press conference. And I'm standing off the side of the stage at the press conference from the side angle. And you had one trainer, and you had Layla Ali. You had the promoter, then you had Jackie Frazier and her trainer. And I swear, it was the same exact facial features of Joe and Muhammad back in the day. It was. That's cool. I got goosebumps, man, looking at you.
That's cool to see.
I'm like, holy, but not their sons, their daughters. And they fought at the Turning Stone, and both Joe and Muhammad were there. And that was the last time that I was together with those 2 guys in the same room. And that was 2007 or 2008 up at the Turning Stone Casino. But that was definitely awesome, man.
That's awesome.
Talk about a beef that transcended generations.
Yeah,
you got your daughter. You got your daughters fighting.
Yeah, that's like a pro wrestling story, Kyle. You know how it goes.
But you know what? I'll tell you something. And there was no real real beef with Joe and Muhammad. Joe's beef was the media just didn't give him what they gave to Muhammad. They didn't. The media didn't. It wasn't all Muhammad's doing. Of course, Muhammad instigated, but that was who he was.
Right.
But then the media even brought Muhammad to the gym, okay, to tease Joe outside of the gym, which was kind of disrespectful. But that's how they sold the stuff. So that beef made news and it sold papers. And then when the two ladies became fighters, that really became because they both had sons, but Muhammad's sons never fought. It was only his daughter that fought, none of his other children. And then Marvis fought, and Marvis was actually, when Marvis fought Larry Holmes, which was the worst fight he had, which everybody remembers, Larry Holmes knocking Marvis out. But by that time, Marvis was 19-1 with 17 knockouts. So he was legitimate, but Larry Holmes was just that much better, and and of course Joe got the heat. Everybody said, oh, he pushed him too fast and he pushed him because he was his son. No, he didn't. That didn't happen. His career happened. He knocked everybody. Out of his first 13 fights, I think he knocked out 10 guys. But when he fought, he was 19-1. He was legitimately a heavyweight contender. But he got, sometimes when the lights go on, some people's lights go out.
Right.
And I think they can get dim, but they're not supposed to go out. And I think when those lights went on that night, Marvis's kind of got a little dim. And I think that's the only thing, because he started showing a little bit and dropping hands. I don't know what he was doing, but,
Dude, we talk about them fights with Ali. That was one of the big things that stuck out when I was watching the documentary, just in the terms of like what it overall did for the sport of boxing. But like you being able to be around the sport and stuff like that, what do you think overall, like the impact of that trilogy of fights did for not just Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, but what it did for the sport in terms of like making it such a big deal? Because if you look at from the fight of the century to the Thrill in Manila, like each one of those was such a big event. And even if you go back and watch it now, whether that's on ESPN Classic, whatever medium you watch it on, you can just look at the people that are in the crowd there and see how electric it was, see the energy that was there.
Let me tell you what that had an impact on boxing. But let me give you a little more juice on that. That had an impact on sports. There is not one. Oh, where you going, Burt? there is not one sport that you can think of that when they're saying or trying to get somebody excited, somebody will say, I want a Frazier Ali. I want you to be Frazier Ali. Think about that. In basketball, in whatever, somehow they equated to Frazier Ali across. So it transcended through sports, all of sports. And I think that is what kind of mesmerized me more, because being in boxing, I knew that was needed. And Muhammad Ali totally changed the landscape of sports, period, with his jibber and his jabber and because after him came Jimmy Connors or McEnroe, was it? Or everybody I could think of in all sports started yapping, and everybody would say Muhammad Ali. Or when they got into Connors and McEnroe, Frazier Ali. The Celtics and the Sixers, Frazier Ali. So that fight and those fights transcended sports across the board, and it left an indelible impression, and it left a range that everyone was compared to. When they said to a team, I want Frazier Ali tonight, everybody on any team knew exactly what that coach meant. In any sport. They wanted that 110%. And it was definitely Ali saw what it meant, and it gave him juice because they just let him run it, and he ran with it. But I can tell you, man, those were in terms, and now this is 2025, and they started in March 8th of 1971. I don't think there's been heavyweight fights that have been compared to that since then. I mean, you've had fighters. Tyson just ran through everybody. Holyfield kind of ran through. You know, you got fighters that did what they did, but to have there haven't been two fighters in any weight class. Now I might be overlooking somebody, but in my head, there haven't been two fighters in any weight class that have taken the sport across a decade like those guys did, like Joe and Muhammad did. You know, it was definitely, and still today. I mean, it's anybody today. If you say today, I want a Frazier Ali,
they know what it is.
They know exactly what they're talking about, and they go to give it to you. You know, but yeah, that was definitely. I mean, but when you're in the middle of that, and it's going on around you, you don't realize how big that is until the end of it. After the fact, and then you realize and you say, "Damn!" I sat myself and watched that documentary, you know, and they did Joe just he died November 7th, 2011, and they actually sat with him about a year or so before he passed. So they caught him at a good time because he could tell the story and really relive it without being bitter, you know, and it was definitely awesome. But there hasn't been, and the way things are going now, I don't think there will ever be, you know, maybe not in my time that I'll get to see that again, but shit.
Those fights still hold up even in 2025, dude. You can go back and watch all that stuff.
You know, another thing that stood out to me in the documentary is something else that you said, in that you feel like you said that you felt like the world never really got to see the real Joe Frazier. Like, for you being somebody that was around him, who is the real Joe Frazier?
Well, when I say that they portrayed Joe exactly the way Muhammad initially gave the world, that you know, he was the man, he was the better looking, you know, he was the guy, and Joe was, but they gave Joe the press without intending to. And I may be a little biased on that because of being from his camp, but I know that for the most part, when they did things on television, they did it from that end and not from the end of the gym, you know. And Joe was, like I said to you, we didn't go to the Playboy Club downtown. We went to hood heaven. Okay, we went to every little dive bar in the neighborhood. Joe was satisfied going to those places, and not necessarily to drink, but to go and listen to music and play the jukebox and have people. He liked interacting with people, and when he went someplace, they went nuts. First of all, they couldn't believe he was in there. you know, and then they just wanted to fill him up with the drinks, and then they wanted to talk to him and feel his muscle. And, you know, let me tell you.
Ladies lining up with shots and muscle grabs.
Let me tell you, boxers and fighters don't realize their strength or realize the power of their arms or their punches. And Joe was one of them. He had a thing where he would do this to me playfully, and that would hurt like hell. But he'd do it with his left hand, you know, boom, boom, boom. That was Joe Frazier's left hook. Okay, playfully tapping me in my ribs, and every time I left, I wanted to make sure it wasn't broken. You know, and I'm like, Joe, come on, bruh. You know, oh, come on, you a man or a mouse? I'm a mouse. You got to stop that. Okay, but he didn't realize, and he liked doing that, but he also enjoyed talking about his career and talking about where he was from in the South, in Beaufort, South Carolina, and growing up on the farm, and coming to Philly, you know, and having, you know, nobody really knowing who he was. You know, he had to take fights that nobody else would take for him to get recognized, you know, until he got in the gym and he beat everybody up and there was nobody left for him to fight. So he ended up going to the Olympic trials, and he got that on a mistake. You know, not a mistake, but somebody else's misfortune. Yeah. You know, but that was his whole life and his whole career. But he was a country boy from Beaufort, South Carolina, that got a break in the city and got a real break. And he was always that way. Was never felt above anybody, never thought he was better than anybody. And not saying anybody ever did, but I can tell you, fame does something to everybody. Yeah. Don't ever let anybody tell you that it doesn't, because it does. But with Joe Frazier, I mean, the fact that he drove the car to my niece's wedding, the fact that he decided, I'm going to let you, Burt Watson, handle my business or handle my stuff as an agent, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Shit, I just gotten out of the Marine Corps, man. You know, I knew how to keep things in order, how to press my jeans, but I didn't know nothing about managing a fighter. You know, but that's the person that he was. But then, so was Ali, so was George Foreman, so were all those guys in that time frame. They were all people persons, you know, all of them.
Hell yeah, man. Another thing that stuck out to me, so I gotta bring this up, bro.
Mm-hmm. You gotta tell me about some of the stories with Joe's medicines, bro. Because I was listening to the shit that you said he put in these bottles, and I'm like, what in the fuck is that supposed to be good for?
Well, you know, he was you younger guys, you know, who are used to doctors. There was back in if you lived back in the South, you couldn't go to a doctor. You had to make your own concoctions. And our grandparents, that's what they did. They made concoctions to make them better, to sward off colds and all that other stuff. And Joe Frazier never left that down south. He brought that with him to Philadelphia. And he had a thing that he used to make a concoction. He would, you know, they used to have a mayonnaise jar that was about this big with a big top on it. He got that and cleaned it out, and he would half fill that up with liquor, castor oil, rock candy, peelings from an apple and peelings from an orange, shake it up and let it sit for about 2 weeks. And he would drink it for whatever ailed him. Whatever ailed him. And then he would top it off with a little bit of castor oil in it. And that shit would sit on his dresser in his apartment, and it was the nasty. And of course, I had to taste it once. That was the nastiest concoction I ever tasted. But Joe would come, and what saved me was that he would pick that big jar up and drink out of it. And I said, I'm not drinking out of that jar. You just drink out of it. I'm not doing that. That saved me. But that was the nastiest concoction. But that was the country, what we would say the Geechee in Joe. But he had that with anything. Joe did not. I had to force Joe. I did found a guy who was a avid Joe Frazier fan. Luckily, he was a doctor. His name was Nicholas DePace. And I had him come to the gym because he was a doctor. And in my head, I'm like, you know what? Because Joe wasn't going to the doctor. That wasn't happening. Joe broke his finger once and wrapped his finger with tape and a sock. That was it. That was it.
Good to go.
That was it. And didn't use it. Didn't use it until it got better. So when we met this guy, Dr. DePace, he was such a fan, and I was glad he was a fan because I said, why don't you come on by the gym? He came by the gym. So him coming to the gym, Joe didn't have to go to his office. Well, he came in one day and he brought his, simple stuff, like a blood pressure machine. And he took Joe's blood pressure, and it was like 220 over 190. Something crazy. But that was normal. And he thought that was not normal for Joe. So he recommended that we put Joe Frazier in the hospital for a couple of days because he didn't like the way it went, or he had to bring that pressure down. So he decided, because I said, Joe, you know what? If you don't do this, you're going to die. Plain and simple, and I think that scared him a little bit because the doctor said, yeah. So he went and he spent a day in there, and that was the first and only time he'd ever been in a hospital. But from that point on, that doctor stayed with us. He brought a heart specialist to the gym. He brought an eye doctor to the gym. He brought everybody came to the gym. Man, I was so happy that he was Joe Frazier at that time, because then in the same time, I got to look. And to this day, I still go to those either same doctors or doctors who were in medical school who are now as old as I am, but I still got the same group of doctors that I go to. And I don't have to make appointments. I just call them now and they say, Burt, get in here. And I go, and get checked. But he was horrible with that. But he took all that stuff, and honestly, I don't know that those concoctions worked, but he was never sick. Okay?
Hey, placebo,
man.
Or
maybe it's the liquor. It's definitely the liquor.
The castor oil, the lemons, the rock candy, and the rock candy, he said, gave it the base. And that rock candy kind of melted and stuck to the side of the glass.
Texture.
But you know what?
I can just imagine what that looks like. And when you were describing it on the thing, I'm just like, oh, fuck. Like that.
Never had a cold, never got a cold. Would drink it, never was coughing with nothing, was always healthy. Didn't always eat right.
He was onto something.
You know what? He was because it worked. And I think, like anything, if you condition your body to a certain thing, after a while, it works. It's like training. Yeah. You train a certain way, and you train for certain things. After a while, it starts to work. And that's what he did, man. And all that shit worked. It was nasty, but I was glad he drank out of the bottle, because if he didn't, he probably would have made me drink some of that stuff.
Ooh.
Between that and his horrible taste in music.
What kind of music did he listen
since you
to?
brought
Yeah,
that
come
up,
on.
I had two other questions that I had to ask you about. I'm surprised J-Bone didn't bring this up with you
I
being the
was waiting.
DJ and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
You got to tell me, bro. So that was the thing that jumped out to me when watching that too is, first of all, how much his upbringing was really like listening to the way his upbringing fueled the way he fought and stuff like that.
Mhm.
How much of that do you feel like because to me, just watching it and being somebody who's been in the ring myself, you could
Right.
just see in the way that he talked, in the way that he did his interviews, and the way that he did everything, even just the way that he fought with like so much grit and things. How much do you think that upbringing and all that stuff kind of fueled him to kind of have that mindset of like, you know what, I didn't have anything when I was growing up, so now that I have it, I'm gonna do everything and anything I can while I can? Because that was just the vibe I got, that he was like, you know what, I didn't have anything coming up, and now I'm gonna get everything and anything while I can.
100%. He realized that he was getting much more than he would have ever gotten if he wasn't Joe Frazier, if he wasn't heavyweight champion of the world. He realized that. And being, like I tell you, how good of a person he was, he didn't take advantage of all of it, but he didn't let none of it slip by him.
Yep.
None of it. You know, he knew, you know, I mean, I've been in the car with Joe, speed down the street and got stopped by cops, and the cops come to the car and freak out because it's him behind the
Joe
wheel.
Frazier.
Yeah, you know, and I know why they stop us, and why they stopped us didn't even become a conversation. You know, they're just talking about everything else. But you know, he was thankful for what he had, but he also had to fight to keep everything that he had. It was nothing easy. He was Joe Frazier, and what he did put him on a pedestal, and his situation with Muhammad Ali put him on a bigger pedestal, and he had to stay on top of it. And then there were a lot of other guys in that division coming at him as well, because he was, even though Muhammad was in there, Joe was the champion. Joe was the one with the belt. So everybody was coming at him. Oh yeah. But he realized that, and he realized how he got everything, and he took advantage of it. But I can honestly tell you that for somebody that was as big a superstar as he was, you would have never known it if he didn't say who he was. You would have never known by the way he acted and the way he carried himself, you know, and the way he talked. You would have never known that he was Joe Frazier.
You know,
never known.
That led right into the other thing I had to ask you about, because
the other thing that seemed like it was one of those things where, like you were saying, when you talk about some of the fights that you got to be around, and now you look back and you're like, yo, I was part of that. When I was listening to you talk about when you and Joe and Muhammad Ali went to go see Nelson Mandela, bro.
Wow.
Talk to me about that. And then you talk about how big of a person Joe is. It was crazy to me when I heard you say he gave him his WBC World Heavyweight Championship. Like, people fight their whole life to get one of them.
To get that,
and to just hand it to him. Now, I understand the significance of who Nelson Mandela was, but I'm just saying that right there tells you a lot about who Joe Frazier was, because he's going to give something like that.
100%. And Mandela was a boxer. He was a boxer himself. He was an amateur boxer. He boxed a little bit, so he loved the sport of boxing. And when he was coming out of prison, they had asked him what was the first couple of things that he wanted to do. And on his list of things was to meet Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. Now, this was Nelson Mandela, who had a list of 5 to 6 things that he wanted to do, And at the top of that list was meeting Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. So they brought him to the UN when he got out of prison. And they called us, and I got the phone call that Nelson Mandela was going to be in New York at the United Nations, and he was going to be speaking, and he wanted to meet Joe Frazier. And I just went in there and I told Joe about it. And honestly, Joe said, "Well, what can we take? What can we give him?" And I said to Joe, I said, "You know what? I can't think of anything that we could give him, that he maybe doesn't have or somebody hasn't given him." Another true story. We got the call that he was going to be there that Wednesday. I don't remember the exact date, but he was going to be there. We had to be there at the United Nations at 7:45 that morning. So it was almost a 2-hour drive from Philly. So I met Joe at 5 o'clock or some ridiculous hour to go. He was wide awake. I got in the gym, went to his office. He's sitting in the office, and we had to go to meet Mandela. We're getting up, walking out of his office, and the belt's on the table. And he grabbed the belt. Not even thinking. There wasn't a discussion or we planned it out or Nelson said, "I want somebody's belt." Joe picked that belt up and walked out with it. And I knew where we were going. So I knew, and that was one of the 2 belts that he had. And he took that belt to New York. And we went downstairs in the basement where they keep all the dignitaries before they come up to that round thing that they sit in. And I sat there. I was kind of in awe because I'd never been in that building, and to see these guys who I know were all world leaders, and they took us in a room, just me and Joe in a room, and we sat in there, and Mandela came in that room. Man, that was like, whoa. I'm sitting with Joe Frazier, and Mandela walks in the room, and I'm starstruck. I'm like, damn.
It don't get much bigger than that.
No. So Joe, they hugged and took pictures, and Joe gave him the belt, and they got pictures of putting the belt. But Joe was there. Tyson was there. A young Tyson with a crew cut.
Hell yeah.
Leonard was there. Muhammad was there. Sugar Ray Leonard. Muhammad was there, and there was another guy I forgot, but they had those guys there. But his thing was meeting Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and we did that, man. And that was, I got pictures of that one, and that's a keeper. That was the only person that I've ever met outside of Ali and Foreman and the rest of them, because between Madonna and everybody liked Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and wherever we went, everybody. We were sitting at a table in California. The guy's name was Kenny Hamilton was his name. He was the manager of Sherman Hemsley, who was George Jefferson. We went out that night to have dinner with them, and I'm sitting there with Kenny, and Sherman Hemsley comes in, and then Mickey Rourke comes walking in. And I'm like, I'm like, this is I do this shit all the time, but no. And then while we're sitting there, there's another 2 people come and sit at the table, and there's a woman sitting there with a hat cocked on the side, and Mickey Rourke is sitting next to me. So I and he knew her, so I said to him, I said, "Who's that?" And he looked at me, he said, "If you got to ask me who that is, you don't need to be sitting at this table." That's exactly who he's. And it was Madonna. Okay, but I, you know what? She had a hat on her head, you know, and she was Madonna, but she wasn't Madonna.
Right.
But he said, if you got to ask who that is, you don't need to be sitting at this table. And it was Madonna.
Gold or anything? Something crazy Madonna used to do?
Nope. She just had on just a man's shirt, kind of rolled up, and a hat kind of broke down over her head. You know, but I'm sitting at the table with, you know, Sherman Hemsley, Mickey Rourke, Madonna, and I forgot who the other person was, you know, and I was like, damn, this ain't that bad, you know?
Hell of a ride, dude.
Oh, yeah, man.
Hold on.
I want to go back to something we hinted on it earlier. We skipped over it. You mentioned that Joe had bad taste in music. Now, I gotta know. I'm gonna put you in a situation here. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Look, you're sitting at that hood bar, that ghetto bar, the little dirty bar, whatever it is, a hole in the wall, as we call it nowadays.
Yeah.
He goes, I need a couple coins to go put in the jukebox. What does he go play?
Mustang Sally by Wilson Pickett. Anything by the Five Blind Boys. Knock on Wood. And a change is gonna come. That's because Joe even sang. I don't know if you knew, but he had a group.
I was gonna ask you that. How good of a singer?
He had a group called Joe Frazier and the Knockouts. Yep. And all those songs from that, but Mustang Sally, that was his last song. You know, but he started with Mustang Sally, but he would start with a change is gonna come, you know, and Knock on Wood, you know, and anything Wilson Pickett made, you know, and he was also in the gospel because there was a group called the Five Blind Boys that he sang all their stuff, but he jazzed it up. Lloyd Price, you know, Otis Redding, you know, and when he first started, he could sing, but then it kind of flipped a little bit. just a little bit, you know. And at that time, we had those 8-track cassette tapes.
Oh shit!
Oh my God! And Joe was afraid of flying, so. The only places that we had to fly was California or out of the country. But if we did something in Florida or South Carolina or any place from Philly that you can drive within 10 hours, we drove. And as we drove, he played that damn 8-track, the same 5 songs over and over and over, and he sang every one of them. Joe could sit in the car and sing for 7 hours, bruh. Oh, I love him to death.
But for like the first hour, he was decent, and then
yeah. But after that tape, because at the time the tape only had like 6 songs on it, and then you had to pull it out and put it back in. You know, and that was that cassette thing. Not the little one now.
Yeah,
but
the big box.
Yeah,
big box.
Big old box.
Oh man,
it's like a VCR tape.
Oh my goodness! And Joe hooked that thing up and had his own speakers hooked up where it was louder than it was supposed to be, and nobody in the car but me and him. And he sang all the way, and he drove all the way. He didn't want me driving. Didn't want me driving.
Wheels right there, man.
No, he did all the driving. But man, that music. Oh, if I hear Mustang Sally one more time, but luckily there's not even a remake of that today. Okay, or Knock on Wood. You know, the only song I hear is I heard somebody sing the other night on one of those shows. The voice of one of them sang "A Change Is Gonna Come." You know, but I heard it. I'm like, oh God! But they sound good. But man, all that was Joe's. That was Joe's go-to. Those 5 songs, shit, man.
Hell yeah.
Well, real quick.
Well, dude, we've kept you for about an hour here, dude. I appreciate the time. We got to do a part 2 to this sometime, my man.
Oh yeah,
man. I'm good. I'm good. He had a question there. I'm good.
Yeah, Corey,
what you got, bro?
Last one before we do wrap up. I mean, we've been talking all this time about the heyday of boxing and stuff, and how big of a sports thing boxing was at one point. And with all your years and experience now being transitioned into MMA and now kind of both in mixed, in a mixed bag in both now. What do you think? Is there any way boxing returns to those type of heights that it was at one point?
Wow.
Has MMA fully overtaken what boxing was at one point in your eyes now? Is MMA the future of combat? I just want to get your thoughts on that whole point while we round out the show.
let me say this, is that what brought boxing to where it was is that boxing worked on the feeder system, meaning it worked on its amateurs. It worked on its young guys, and guys went through an amateur program and they went through the Olympics. I don't think we have an Olympic boxing team anymore. I don't think they paid much attention to the Olympic boxing team. So my personal opinion is that the feeder system is not what it used to be. The amateur programs are not given the same. I don't know whether it's the same attention but and the names, now I think it's Triple G, Canelo, those guys. That's it. Yep. And once those guys are I don't know the next group of guys that are coming up in boxing. And do we have an amateur program to speak of? Not that I know of. Are we going to be in the next Olympics with the boxing team? We didn't the last Olympics, so I don't see us going further. So my answer is that MMA has definitely kind of taken the mantle, and it's now called combat sports. And I think the focus is on combat sports with MMA and its different divisions of Muay Thai, kickboxing. From that, it goes to grappling and wrestling, and then high school and college wrestling. And then you got boxing down there, which, will that ever change? The way it's going now, I don't see it happening. I don't see it.
It's so crazy you say that, because when I came up and first started boxing, I remember going to go watch the Golden Gloves when Tony Harrison was still fighting in the Golden Gloves. Jay Leon Love was still in the Golden Gloves from out here back when Clarissa Shields was still fighting in those tournaments. To your point, boxing at one point, the Golden Gloves, Silver Gloves, all those tournaments that we talk about, those were huge. When I was younger and first started boxing, to go fight in one of those tournaments, whichever one it was this big ass deal, and everybody came and watched that shit. Now you don't hear nearly as many people talk about Golden Gloves, like you said, an Olympic team for the U.S., all those things. That was the first thing I thought of when you said that, because, like I said, when I was coming up, you had Silver Gloves, you had Golden Gloves.
Yeah. That was the feeder system, and that's gone. And why it's gone? And I'll tell you. Television also had a big part in that as well, because out of nowhere, HBO and Showtime and ESPN, the network, they dropped it.
Yeah.
You found every big fight on HBO or Showtime or even on CBS. None of that is anymore. When they gave up on it and they stopped giving it a platform, it kind of really took a luster out of it. And now even ESPN, boxing is still on, but
it's not as big as when UFC comes on.
No, and not only that, but there was a channel that shows boxing, but you got to have a special cable with channels 155,000 to go see boxing. Yep. It's not on the lower channels where everybody's watching. So it's definitely has suffered, and I think I can't see a big recovery with the momentum that combat sports has and MMA has and grappling and all that other stuff. I can't see anything turning that around right now. And it's only going to get bigger because it's getting more popular, and it's you got more promoters coming into MMA and other forms of combat sports now, as opposed to you still got Don King and Bob Arum that are promoting boxing.
Top rank.
You know, and I'm not disrespecting those guys, but they're still promoting boxing, and I think it's what's PB? Oh, I can't think. Is that what it is? PBC with Heyman, Al Heyman, and somebody.
Yep.
Yeah. But is there a television contract on that? You know,
I don't think so anymore.
It's all DAZN nowadays. If you want to follow boxing, that's your only real route is following DAZN. And to see, really, I think I don't want to say the only hope, because boxing, I feel like, is always going to have its roots and it's always going to have its fans.
Yes.
It's just, to your point, it's going to struggle with the TV and the interest and stuff like that it had in the past. But to see what is going on in the Middle East right now is definitely helping the sport. But in my eyes, as a fan, it's also kind of hurting the sport in a different aspect, because it's exposing it for kind of what it's turned out to be at this point, in my eyes. And it's a bunch of money hungry, who wants to cash the biggest bags type of fights, instead of where we're seeing, like, we're finally getting these competitive matchups, but it's only because each guy's getting the craziest amount of checks that they could ever imagine to finally make these matchups that we've been waiting for years to finally be brought to the forefront.
But you know what else is on the forefront of that, and as you're saying, is that now it's money coming from outside of the United States, you know, and right now that Saudi money is just, I mean, it's just killing it.
Crazy.
You know, and that's where it is. And when you have the financial aspects to control it, that's where it's going to go. But it still needs a feeder system. And until they work on that, you know, I mean, you can't just get title fights without having regular street fights. Okay. You got to get those first.
There's a reason why MLB has both the AA, single A, and AAA. There's a reason why the NBA, even with the smaller team size, has now brought in the NBA G League for almost every team, so that they also have another shot for all these guys to be able to, you know, show their way to the top. I mean, we see it all the time, especially in MMA, with these guys that come in with a younger record, but they're highly touted prospects. Maybe they lose one or two, but you end up seeing them 5 years into their career and where they actually end up becoming once they've blossomed their skills and stuff like that. I feel like, to your point, that's where a lot of these feeders leagues and stuff like that, that's what you need. You can't just always jump to the top and expect the result.
No, it's not. The saving grace with boxing is that boxing is the creator of combat sports. Boxing goes back to Joe Louis, you know, Jack Dempsey, you know, John L. Sullivan. It is the creator of the sport. So I think that it's holding on to that, and that's holding on. Boxing is going to be around, but somewhere along the line, somebody decided that we're not going to ride this horse anymore, and we're not going to put it on the networks and the televisions. And you know, you can turn on an MMA event or UFC event right now and see a guy with a 3-0 record who's on the main card.
Yeah.
You know, getting that television exposure. You know, and when it's over, you guys are talking about him and got him on your show, and somebody else puts him on another show. But you know, I don't remember the last time I've seen anyone really take a group of young boxers and put them on. Everybody has a podcast today. There are so many shows that these guys can go on, and what do they do? I don't know. I may be missing it, but I don't see
a lot
it.
of fighters don't. You know, one thing we've been doing the show 8 years, and one thing I've noticed we've had guys from UFC, Bellator, bare knuckle, guys on the way up, amateurs, the whole thing. And you know, one thing that I've noticed nowadays versus like what you would see is like, even though there is much more, like you said, as far as platforms that people can go to do that, I still don't think that the fighting world as a whole has gotten to a point that they understand now, with the more openness and availability of different platforms, how much easier that makes it for them to, you know, get out here, say your piece, have your platform to say whatever it is you want to say. You know what I mean? Where back in the day, like you said with boxing, like when I came up in boxing, you didn't see a guy on TV until he was like 19, 20-0. Don't know who he fought. Halftime, you don't know shit about his record. You know, he's 20-0, and now he's just starting to get to the good guys. Where now, like you said, you know, you've got guys from the UFC. Like you look at a Bo Nickel. I mean, he had the whole wrestling background before he comes in. But to your point, he's only got 3-4 pro fights already on the main card. Now, obviously, that's a special case when you're talking about his credentials as far as wrestling. But to your point, you don't have or another one that stuck out when I was a kid. You don't have Friday night fights anymore. You don't have Wednesday night fights. I used to love when I first started boxing. I swear, Corey can attest to this. I swear to God, every Friday I went home and I was watching that shit with Joe Tessitore and Teddy Atlas on it, and the whole deal.
And that started on Tuesday. That started on Tuesday night, USA.
I watched Tuesday night fights too.
Yep.
That's the thing, man. There's so many staples of what boxing used to be. You know, like I said, you know, you had Joe Tessitore, Teddy Atlas. You know, I remember watching guys like Emmanuel Augustus Burton and the crazy ass shorts he'd wear and he'd get in the ring. And like, I mean, there's so many guys that you watch that work their way up when you really think about it. From like the Tuesday night fights, Wednesday night fights, Friday night fights. Then to your point, then you got Showtime and HBO and watching that shit with Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman and all them. Like it just used to be such a thing. Like you would work your way to the different platforms. And like I said, I've noticed with a lot of the younger fighters, like unless it's like a big platform, like an Ariel Helwani or something like that, then people want to do this stuff. But getting yourself on all these different platforms, you've got more availability now than there's ever been in combat sports to get yourself out there. Dude, like I was telling you, we were talking the other day, some of the best viewed shows we've ever had on this show happen to be just two guys that were fighting each other on a local card here because everybody tuned in because they wanted to see them talk shit to each other.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Yeah. Well, but I don't know. But if it's something that you have to discuss as to why it's not happening, it's not going to happen. Not when today you got Hulu, Zulu, Yulu. I didn't even know that the zone was spelled DAZ whatever with 4 letters in it. But you got all those platforms today, and they're all available. But you know what? I don't see any boxing taking advantage of it. You know, and it shouldn't just be big fights. It shouldn't just be the mega fights that people get, because that's what people are missing. You know, they should be able to see up and coming guys, but good fights, good matchmaking. You know, matchmaking used to be a thing, a real thing. You know, I don't know if that's still there, man. But I'm also in the mindset of when MMA and mixed martial arts came along, and I know that shit had legs back in 2001, and now it's got tentacles.
Yeah,
you know, it's shit. You know, and is somebody's gonna be able to get under that big Godzilla and King Kong? No, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen. They're too big right now, and that's just the way we are.
Have you gotten into any of the bare knuckle? Do you like watching bare knuckle?
I did the BYB Extreme. I did that in Florida. I did 4 or 5 shows with them. It was quite the experience. But I'm a guy in combat sports, and that was another leg of combat sports. You know, it was a little tough to see women in bare knuckle.
Yeah, they get down.
Yeah, you know, that was for me. You know, I'm a boxing guy. You know, but that was a little tough. But yeah, I've done bare knuckle. I'm a coordinator by profession. So any type of combat sports or any event that you can, my first major event was Telemundo.
Oh shit.
Okay, and it was the American Music Awards. That's the first event I ever did. Was really when, you know. So I'm a coordinator.
Jack of all trades.
So whatever you're going to do, you're going to put in a venue with television, and somebody's got to get on a stage or on a platform or a ring, a cage, or an octagon or a dojo. I can do it. Plain and simple.
Oh yeah.
You heard the man. Shout out to BYB Extreme. Greg Bloom is a past guest of this show, as well as Danielle Monet. And you talked about Duran. A little birdie told me his son, Roberto Duran Jr. might be joining us, who fights for him soon.
Wow. Wow. I did Duran. I did 3 or 4 of his fights. I did 5, because I did his last 2. And I did the one where, did he fight Camacho? Who did Duran fight? I did his last, whatever his last fight was. You know, my head gets a little foggy, but that's my man. That is
Camacho's last fight.
Yeah,
2001.
Okay. I did that fight. Macho was my man. We were, man. I went and got Camacho out of a house one time, and you know what kind of house I'm talking about. and that was the night before the fight.
What's understood don't bother me.
The crazy part about it was I knew where he was.
Okay? I bet you did.
He wasn't where he was supposed to be, and I knew exactly where he was. And I got in the car, and I went up
his ass.
to the second floor, and I got it. I sure did. I went, yo!
Hell
yeah, man.
We rolling.
Yep, and he was in.
We rolling for sure.
And he was in there. Okay, my man.
Hell yeah. He heard the we rolling call and knew it was time to go. It looks like Body Slam is giving me the go home cue. So, Burt, before we get out of here, man, let everybody know where they can find you and anything that you got coming up. And we definitely got to do this again, my man.
Well, I appreciate you. And any platform, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, Burt Watson for real. My book is out, Being Burt Watson. Someone just helped me write this, and I just released it, and I'm very proud of it. And every story that I've told you tonight is in that book, baby, and it's now on Amazon. Being Burt Watson. I appreciate you guys. Much love, and anytime I can do it, I'm here for you, baby. Holla.
Hey, man, It was a great time, dude. I really enjoyed this one. For everybody that's checking us out, make sure if you guys are in the Detroit area, the Elimination Chambers this weekend, we're throwing another party. I heard we're giving away another belt. You need to check out that link that's on all the social medias. Make sure you come check us out. Check out Potters of Destiny. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and shout out to Millions and everybody else. Until next time and in the in-between time, we'll
We'll see you on Thursday.
Let's go,
Peace.
Detroit. Peace.
Hell yeah. Let's
That's a
go,
boy.
Pistons. Let's go, Lions, damn it.